Is that not one of the best looking phones you've ever seen? This is the new OPPO Find X6 Pro, and it's not just this fancy dual-tone vegan leather design that makes me incredibly excited about this. I mean, I could film this thing all day, and I love the fact that we get a matching case bundled in the box. It also has one of the brightest screens you can get on a phone, proper flagship specs like the Snapdragon 8 Gen 2, up to 16 gigs of RAM and 512 storage and 5000 mAh battery. But the best bit, as you probably guessed, is this has quite possibly the most advanced camera system on any phone, with its triple 50 megapixel setup and huge 1-inch sensor for the main lens. Very exciting stuff then, and proper competition to the likes of the Vivo X90 Pro and the Xiaomi 13 Pro, both of which also have 1-inch camera sensors, and of course the default flagship Android phone, if you will, the S23 Ultra. However, there is a problem, or rather a large problem. You can't actually buy this. In a cruel twist, after years of the X series launching globally, and also OPPO taking me on a super secret trip to Spain a few weeks ago to test the camera, and then also sending me this review sample, it turns out this is only launching in China. Kind of like the Find N2, although unlike the new N2 Flip, which is launching globally. And it is odd. I mean, we've had the Find X5 and X3 and X2 and all previous X series phones, I think, launching internationally, but for whatever reason, the OPPO bosses are like, let's send these US and UK media samples of the phone, let's take them on trips to test the camera, teach them how to use it, and show off this fantastic new phone with a drool-worthy camera, but then let's not sell it to them. That'll show them. So unless you want to ship one from China and then enable Google services and download the Google Play Store via APK, which is what I've done here, well, you're out of luck. There is always a chance it'll launch outside China in a few months, as we often do see these separate launch windows, but there's nothing confirmed. But hold your horses before you skip to the next video because you think, well, that's a complete waste of time if I can't buy it. Stay tuned because actually this is a really exciting phone and this camera is going to blow you away. We have to start with this camera because while it's not the first to boast a 1-inch main sensor, we already have the Xiaomi 13 Pro and Vivo X90 Pro, and each with their own named photography brand tuning their software to various extents, but OPPO is marketing the X6 Pro as not just having a main camera, but 3 main cameras. 50 megapixel wide with that big 1-inch sensor and a Sony IMX989, then the ultra wide and telephoto, which have smaller sensors and share the same lower tier IMX890. But they are still higher spec than pretty much any other rival, and importantly, both the hardware and the software with the processing aims to deliver an unrivaled continuity between all 3 lenses. There's no weak link here, and I have to say, having played with this for the past couple of weeks, from Malaga to London, at home, and also on a beautifully styled wedding shoot with my wife for her floristry business, this camera system is very impressive. The dynamic range, the detail, the texture on the skin, and as promised, switching between the lenses is smooth and it maintains the color, the white balance, and the detail, although the bokeh, that deliciously professional looking background blur, is much stronger with the main lens thanks to the bigger sensor. Which, by the way, is 156% larger than the X5 Pro and can capture 142% more light, which is more. The ultra-wide also doubles as a very capable macro lens, although I did turn off the auto macro mode to avoid that annoying lens switching when you get a bit too close to your subject. But then at the other end of the spectrum, the zoom on this thing is fantastic and it gives the S23 Ultra some proper competition. OPPO say this is the largest sensor and also the largest aperture for a periscopic telephoto camera, and it shows. In fact, they're so confident with their hybrid zoom beyond the optical 3x, they even give us a shortcut to the 6x zoom in the camera app, which they say using their in-sensor zoom technology and also pixel binning does give us a 6x optical zoom, but it's somewhat debatable if that's truly optical. Either way though, 6x zoom on this looks bloody good, even at night. You're going to be sick of me drooling over this camera by the end of the video, I promise, but the quality and the versatility of this thing is just incredible. From the macro and the ultra-wide to the 2x zoom, which uses a 12 megapixel crop of that 1-inch main camera's 50 megapixel resolution, to the optical 3x, then the quote-unquote optical 6x, and I reckon even up to 15x is still very usable. And I'm equally impressed by how this performs in low light and at nighttime. Photos look natural, the night mode shots aren't overly exposed or unrealistically bright. I'm still blown away by what this camera is capable of in basically any lighting conditions. But I know what you're thinking, Tom, what about moon photos? I take moon photos all the time, says no one ever. But obviously we do have this recent controversy with the S23 Ultra and how Samsung are kind of replacing / AI upscaling pictures of the moon. The complexities and questions over what actually is a photo and is what they're doing cheating or actually just giving you what you want is probably a conversation for another time. But the question is, does this do the same? And actually, I think it might. This is the moon, and if we go through the different lenses, zooming further and further in, nothing really going on there except a bright spot in the sky until suddenly we get this, which looks exceptionally good. Too good, you might say. I need to do more research and also probably get a comment from OPPO to tell me how that actually works before I give any sort of conclusive judgment on that, but it does look a little bit too good to be true. What do you think? As I say, I've taken a ton of photos with this, and many side by side with the iPhone 14 Pro Max, and here's a few examples. But if you would like me to make a full versus video between these two, let me know in the comments. Although my impression is the OPPO is better for photography and also portrait shots, but the iPhone wins for selfies and video. It can all get very complicated trying to explain how the camera on this works, because we've got the hardware, we've got their own Silicon X NPU, which is their little extra chip, which can take some of the stress off this Snapdragon chip's ISP and then sort of handles it itself, and also with ultra low light video and also HDR video does some extra processing. So we also have that Silicon X, and also of course the Hasselblad partnership, which adds a couple of classic camera modes like X-Pan, and also of course their color science, although apparently that is still limited to the Pro camera app. However, the important thing is for photography, this is one of, if not the best camera phone on the market. But there is another problem, aside from not being able to buy this, and that is that they've kind of forgotten about video and the selfie. Because while video quality is a little bit better versus last year's X5 Pro, thanks to the improved algorithm and better software processing, it's not a significant upgrade, particularly from a hardware perspective. Although you can now shoot Dolby Vision HDR in 4K 30, and the best bit is you can watch it back on the X6 Pro screen as it also supports Dolby Vision. So video on the X6 Pro is broadly very good. No major upgrades in quality, but it still fares well, even in low light, thanks in part to that Silicon X and its ultra low light noise reduction. The less said about their portrait video, the better. I literally have no words for how bad this is. Maybe updates will fix this, or maybe it's just absolutely rubbish. There's also been no real improvements to the selfie camera either over the X5 Pro. It's the same 32 megapixel IMX709 RGBW sensor. It is still pretty good, and even in low light I'm impressed by the detail and the white balance, so as with video, no hardware upgrade, but it's still fine. What's not so fine though is selfie video, because even with its flagship hardware and flagship price, we're still limited to 1080p 30, and it doesn't appear there's any kind of stabilization. Honestly, this is borderline unforgivable, and it's a very similar story to the OnePlus 11. I just don't know why video and the selfie camera are such afterthoughts.
Okay, I'm shooting this on the X6 Pro with the back camera because I could use a selfie, but it's still limited to 1080p. Still limited to 1080p. Not ideal. But I'm really curious what the low light video is with the main camera. It's that 1-inch sensor. Looking at the screen, it does seem remarkably stable. Still can't shoot in 8K though. You know, the S23 Ultra can do 8K 30 now. Still limited to 4K 60, but to be honest, who cares really? No one's shooting in 8K. But it definitely feels like they're prioritizing photography rather than video, and indeed the selfie camera as well.
I mean, it really does feel more like a camera than a phone in some ways, with this huge module on the back which completely dominates the design. And because of the size of it, if you are watching videos or gaming or just using it in landscape mode, your fingers are always going to rest right on the lenses like that, so you're going to get some greasy, mucky fingerprints. It's such a cool design though, and there are so many little touches that just make it feel even more premium. Like the camera module has this split two-tone design just like the back of the phone, with this orangey vegan leather and metallic looking glass dual-tone back. Which I must admit I had kind of hoped might be a manual focus ring when I first picked this up. It is not, but I did notice only this vegan leather model has these tiny little etchings or grooves in that ring. The other black and green glass versions don't have this for some reason. I don't know why I'm giving buying advice on a phone you can't buy, but I would go with the vegan leather model, although actually the downside is it's 0.4mm thicker than the other glass versions. But whichever model you don't buy, you'll get IP68 water resistance and Gorilla Glass Victus 2 on the front. It's a great looking phone, although these curved edges to the screen aren't going to be everyone's cup of tea, but it certainly looks and feels high-end. And I think most of us are probably quite pleased to see OPPO moving on from the design of the X3 and X5 Pros. Up front, this big 6.82-inch Quad HD Plus 120Hz screen is largely unchanged, although it does now utilize LTPO3 tech, so we get more efficient dynamic switching of the refresh rate, and also extra credit to OPPO for letting me select auto switch for both the resolution and the refresh rate. However, the biggest upgrade here, aside from also now supporting Dolby Vision along with HDR10, is we get a brighter screen, and according to OPPO, it can achieve 800 nits with normal indoor use, 1500 outdoors, 2200 nits with HDR, and an absolute peak of 2500 nits, which would make this the brightest phone ever. But I cannot replicate those numbers to save my life. Even playing HDR video in direct sunlight. Maybe I'm missing a trick and doing it wrong, and it is still very bright, so I'm not complaining, but I just haven't been able to replicate OPPO's own numbers myself. Regardless, it is an incredible screen, and looking at your photo gallery, which I found myself doing quite a lot with this phone, watching videos or playing games, it all looks and sounds fantastic with the dual Dolby Atmos speakers.
Which should I choose?
Now, speaking of gaming, I have come across a bit of a problem with this. Let's talk about performance. And no surprises, this boasts the latest and greatest Snapdragon 8 Gen 2 with faster RAM and storage, and in Geekbench 6 it performs as expected versus the latest from Xiaomi, Vivo and Samsung, although you can see the Vivo's multi-core is surprisingly low due to throttling, which unfortunately we do also see on the X6 Pro if we bring in the results from the graphically demanding 20-minute 3D Mark Wildlife Extreme stress test. But the stability is just 41%, meaning we have a low of just 6 frames per second. It does use less battery as a result, but only because the chip isn't at full power for as long. Now, I can't say if it's the material being used or poor internal cooling, but either way, while this won't affect you in everyday use and it still feels very nice and fast, gamers will want to look elsewhere, which is disappointing. Although some good news is the new chip gives us Bluetooth 5.3 and Wi-Fi 7 support, which is nice. Now, as for battery life, I am working on a big 2023 flagship smartphone comparison video to test the batteries and see how they all compare, so make sure you have subscribed and stay tuned for that. But so far, it's been lasting me a good day and a half by the end of a regular day using this, which I haven't been doing as like my regular phone because this is the Chinese version and I'm not getting 5G on my SIM card, so it's not like a like for like. We have a healthy 5000 mAh cell, and OPPO promised you'll still have 80% of your battery's capacity even after 4 years. We also get their 100-watt SuperVOOC fast charging, which gives us 0 to 100 in 28 minutes, plus 50-watt wireless Air VOOC and also 10-watt reverse wireless charging. And finally, in terms of software, this chip's running Android 13 with OPPO's ColorOS 13.1 on top, and they promise a fairly mediocre 3 years of Android updates. So to wrap up, I am genuinely really disappointed that you can't buy this outside China, although I guess in lieu of this, if you want something very similar, I would say the Xiaomi 13 Pro is its closest rival with a pretty similar camera setup. The zoom's not quite as good, although in some ways I actually prefer the camera processing on this. I also found performance and battery life to be a little bit better on the Xiaomi, and also you can buy it, which is quite literally a big selling point. But what do you think? If you could buy this, would you be tempted? Let me know what you make of this in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this review and don't want to miss my next video, including my big battery comparison, make sure you have hit that subscribe button. Thank you so much for watching, guys, and I'll see you next time right here on the Tech Chat.